Remote control photography goes back to the turn of the last century, late 1890s, early 1900s. In France in particular, they were doing all sorts of stuff with big man-carrying kites and sometimes teleoperated to take photos. They even had, at that time, very small cameras attached to carrier pigeons with a little clockwork mechanism. The pigeon didn't know how to operate the camera, but they were interested in using that for wartime surveillance. About 10 years ago, what happened was this kind of thing. It has, I'll show you all the moving parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no servo mechanisms, there's no flaps or things to go out of alignment. There's a couple of gyros and accelerometers so that if a gust hits it, it kind of corrects itself. But pushing all the complexity into software is what made these things so disposably cheap.
This is $45, and the only customization I did was to take the canopy off and spray paint it orange.
Some people call them drones. I'd like to really call them, toy helicopters, because that's what they are. The origin of this project was my involvement with radio-controlled aircraft, and I was getting into helicopters and found these, really cheap ones that everybody is shooting video from scaring the cat to filming little Johnny's softball game. And I thought, hey, no one's using these things for still photography, and that's what I'm interested in, because a still photo you can analyze and make some sense of in a very different way than a video. So I wanted to see, can we get good stills out of the very low quality video cameras that these things carry? The particular benefit here is that you're using something that costs less than $50 to produce, what you would really think would take a few $1,000s of equipment to pull off this kind of photo. If you're going to make a still, a panorama is the obvious thing to do. And if you want to make a panorama, you do that from somewhere high up. The first step is just picking where to stick the aircraft, weighing the risks, what are the hazards, what rooftops might this thing get stuck on for a month. Once I'm flying and I've got the copter about where I think that the camera is looking, then I do a slow pirouette back and forth so that the camera has a chance to do its auto white balance, to do its automatic exposure, and try that from a few different points of view, because you don't know exactly where the camera is looking. You don't have a live downlink. With the final video, what I do is extract all these still frames out of that segment of video. This one shoots 60 frames a second, and I'm typically stitching between 100 and 250 photos together to make a panorama. The overall layout depends on the motion of the camera. If it's a nice calm day and I can just do that, then you could get a nice rectangle out of that. If the camera was actually doing that, then you'll end up with something more of distortion. What's marketable about these things is their little video cameras. It's really as bad a camera as you can get. It doesn't have a lot of dynamic range, and there's several artifacts that come from using this kind of an imager because the camera is such low quality. So there's some piloting skills, there's some planning skills, and then there's a pile of software. The tools for cleaning up the individual images that will become the panorama. Part of that is stuff I've written myself, part of that is off the shelf. All the code that I've written is open source. I've put up a white paper explaining in great detail every single step, and all this stuff is free or off the shelf in terms of how to turn 10 seconds of video into one nice looking photo. What these very small quadcopters have going for them for taking these panoramic photos, primarily it's risk. Secondarily, I'd say that they're cheap and you don't have to be upset if they're damaged or if they try to damage something else, which they really can't. But risk is the biggie. If something that weighs several pounds and's got 8 rotors, each of which can sever an artery, is up there somewhere, and then something goes wrong, either the wind gets gustier or you're flying close to a building and a rotor comes around the building and upsets it. You really don't want that thing crashing into somebody's windshield. You got to treat these things with respect. So I thought, okay, this thing is basically as harmless as a frisbee. This lets me fly in places that I otherwise wouldn't dare to. Some of the things that I've filmed before have just been things from my past. My undergrad campus, the town that my family moved to. The Arboretum, just gorgeous, brilliant, colorful octagon. It's beautiful from the ground. It's even more beautiful from the air. Sometimes it's just, I've got 10 minutes to kill and waiting for something, and oh look, I've got my camera with me, and the wind's not too high. let's just take it up there and, as they say, spray and pray, see what comes out. This started as a hobby. Since then, I'm messing around with aerial photography and stuff. I'm doing one collaboration with a few professors in vet med. Precision ag is the big buzzword. That you can map out a crop field, usually with a multispectral camera that can sense different parts of the green of the leaf very accurately and say, oh, that needs more nitrogen, that part of the field has this kind of pest invasion, and then you just take your thumb drive, plug it into your tractor with the sprayers or whatever it has, or the mowers or the cutters, and you apply whatever treatment you need to the place that you need it, and not just over the whole field. Something a little more speculative is the beef industry, trying to infer the health of cattle in feedlots from their spatial arrangement, because the endangered species is the cowboy. There aren't enough cowboys to go around monitoring, so we'd like to be able to give them, using this kind of technology, a way to say, which pens should you visit first, which pens are likely to have a disease outbreak. If we can automate some of this and then tell the cowboy, oh, go look at pen number 43 and 68, look at those first this morning. That is a nice example of robots and humans doing a task together, each of which it's good at. The starting point was really seeing how cheap these quadcopters have become. It's like, okay, maybe there's something cool I can do with them. And eventually, here's where I am today. I've got a pretty decent camera that I'm not afraid to have cows walk on.